Okay, minority is becoming a majority. And I have said this in a previous video. Some people were happy about this, and some people are not. And as you see from the way some people react in certain circumstances, different people will express how they feel. So, out of the sense, well, it's sort of like an overall research center, the Pew Research Center, here by Hannah Fingerhut. Most Americans express positive views of the country's growing racial and ethnic diversity. And so, a lot of times, when I mention the word minority, um, the reason why I say that is not to embrace it, to say, oh, yay, I'm a minority. You know, some people who don't understand, or they're too hardcore in, terms. Um, it's what is said, you know, in general to classify people who are of non-Anglo-Saxon or non-white um, racial groups. And so that is the reason why I'll use the term. But the majority of Americans, it's saying here, continue to say that the US is a better place to live as a result of its growing racial and ethnic diversity. So about 6 in 10 US adults, 58%, say that having an increasing number of people of different races, ethnic groups, and nationalities in the US makes the country a better place to live. And 9% say it makes the country a worse place to live, while about 3 in 10, which is 31%, say it doesn't make much difference either way, according to their Pew Research Center survey conducted in April and May. And so this was fairly recent. So the attitudes are only modestly changed from the last year. So there remains a wide difference in the views by Democratic leaning independents. Say growing diversity in the US makes it a better place to live, including 78% of Democrats who describe themselves as liberal. A smaller majority of conservatives and moderate Democrats, 66%, say the same. So you can see a graph here. It shows Democrats are far more likely than Republicans to have positive views of growing diversity in the US. So percent who say an increasing number of people of many different races, ethnic groups, and nationalities make a better US to live. And so they have the percentages. People who are conservative and liberal, modestly liberal, are conservative, or moderate conservatives, liberals, Democrats, what their views are. It even goes by age. So by comparison, about half of the Republicans and the Republican leaners, 47%, see a positive impact of the growing diversity in the US. 37% say it doesn't make much difference. Another 14% say it makes the country a worse place to live, while positive views among Republicans vary little by ideology. Negative views are somewhat more widespread among conservative Republicans and moderate and liberal Republicans. So that we can see in the news. We see it all the time, and especially when they start talking about election. So about 1 in 6 conservative Republicans, 17%, say growing racial and ethnic diversity makes the country worse, while 7% of the moderate and liberal Republicans also agree. So they give in living in a racially and ethnically diverse community. So Democrats are twice as more likely as Republicans, 75% to 38%, to say this is very or somewhat important to them, according to the Research Center Pew's research survey conducted earlier in the year. So across all age groups, about half or more say increasing diversity makes a country a better place to live. However, 15% of those 65 and older say growing ethnic diversity makes the US a worse place to live, highest among age groups. So it's those people who are old school, old school, um, and who say that it could possibly make, you know, people who are up in age who probably come from a different, and it has to do with generation and what they've been taught, what they've probably experienced when they were growing up. Um, uh, Even with diversity, that there's racial divides with some of these issues that we're seeing. Views vary significantly by education attainment as well, with more highly educated adults more likely to embrace growing racial and ethnic diversity. So it has a sizable education divide over impact of growing diversity, smaller differences by age and race. And so it gives like whether it's a better place or it's no different or a worse place based on people's ethnicities and their ages and their whether they have a college background or not. And so it goes on to say that about 8 in 10 adults with post-grad degrees, 81% say the growing diversity makes the country a better place to live. Smaller, though sizable majorities of college graduates, 70%, and those with some college experience, 61% say the same. Among those with a high school diploma or degree, 5% say growing diversity percent will say it makes the country a worse place to live. And so that's pretty much it. And this is Hannah Fingerhunt. She's a research analyst focusing on the US politics and policy at Pew Research Center. And so it pretty much is like sort of like um, somewhat of a view of what American society feels about race relations in the country. And so I've used the term minority a lot, and some people don't want to be called a minority because it sometimes they get offended by that, and then others look at it as like you're how would you say, marginalizing people. And a lot of times people don't like being labeled or called specific names, but a lot of the things that they're using, the terms they're using, is because of classifying people so that you know which groups that they're particularly focused on. And so they may say, instead of saying those blacks, they'll say the minority group, African American minority group, or whatever like that. That's how can you ever say something without offending people? And so sometimes people are offended if you say things in a way where it really doesn't sound offensive, but maybe they take it personal because of the fact that you're trying to talk about topics surrounding nationality or race or a person's native country. And so the term minority usually refers to people who are non-Anglo-Saxon, or they're not white, non-white people. And so they will usually use the term minority group. And so even though people who are in the what they would quote as minority group, you may not be happy with that label. That is a way that some people will use to try to explain, so that they can talk about a wide range of topics involving people of color, rather, people who are Black, people who are Hispanic, people who are, from wherever other country, and if they're not white. And so that is the reason. But more recently, they have shown that there's a larger number of increase of people in the minority group, which would be people Black, Hispanic, and their other Asian. And so that has created a lot of stir. And so that is the reason why a lot of census takers. They'll go to different neighborhoods so they can see who lives all in the neighborhood, and that kind of gives them an idea of the growing um, majority now is what used to be the minority is now becoming the majority group, and is changing the face of the US. And so that's why we're also experiencing a lot of fights, political fights involving this. And I've clarified that, especially within, election coming up and all these issues coming up, and all the social issues and things that are coming up in society, that makes for what goes on the ballot and what people will vote for or against. And so a lot of times politicians, they know how to travel to certain places to find out what types of topics talk to or target in terms of who they think they're going to get the most vote points on what it is that they're trying to, eradicate, or what bills or laws they're trying to bring about and pass. Then, like, for example, the change profile of unmarried parents, okay? US women more likely to have children than a decade ago, different topics, okay, what kinds of things are, things that are important in society, social trends, the gender differences, no consensus on nature versus nurture, how millennials today compare with their grandparents 50 years ago, sexual harassment at work, the era of the #Me Too movement, all the things they think are social trends, America's complex relationship with guns, women in the majority, male workplaces report higher rates of gender discrimination. That will probably be something talked about. US marriage rate hovers at 50%, education gap and marital status widens. Stuff like that, things you wouldn't believe, but these things, people, they do a lot of research. They do a lot of, like, trying to figure out, what types of things are most influential in social trends in American society, and then how does it play into politics. And so this is the reason why they'll use specific terms geared towards whatever target group that they're trying to cater to, so that you can bring all of those frustrations to the polls, hopefully. And so that's the reason why the face of the US has been changing rapidly. And so that also makes for more issues surrounding how people will relate to one another. And so this is the reason why we have a lot of people talking about subjects or topics dealing with race and, police violence, and how people are treated in public businesses, how people are represented on television, how people are treated in terms of mass incarceration, who's most, how would you say, who is most targeted, in terms of, fairness in the judicial system. So it's like, these are the things that they focus on. And so the more that most Americans express positive views of the country's growing racial ethnic diversity, the one that I just went over, it shows a lot about how people feel. Younger generations make up the majority of the electorate, but may not be the majority of the voters this November. So like I said, they're trying to get young people to come in and vote. And so they have to push all these hot button topics to get you to come out, to get you to, vent at the polls. And so it does express a lot of how people feel. It's personal. And so they've been making it more like a personal thing. And so what better way to get people to be interested in voting, and rather than, talking about the boring humdrum politics, bring out the real hot trends, social trends, the things that are happening in the US today. And so this is a thing that's going on now. And so I'm going to end this video, but this right here, if you care to look at it, it's the Pew Research Center, U.S. Politics and Policy. A lot of people will mention it, but they won't show you where it is or give you the title of it. But this shows a lot about what is happening in our society today. In terms of, also it talks about the age gap in religion around the world, and how all of this isn't influential in everybody's life in some shape, form, or fashion. But with that being said, I'm going to end this video. But like I said, the title is called Pew Research Center, and it has a whole host of facts, percentages, things like that. It may not be the only one, but this is the main one usually that people go to when they want to find out percentages of what kinds of social trends or things are happening in society. But anyway, with that being said, like and subscribe, and thanks for listening.